So I'm seeing all of us, and this is wonderful. Welcome to our third episode of RN Connect. And I will tell you, I was super excited before I got on to our show today that I just offered an ICU night shift position. It was a nurse who's been doing some traveling, as many nurses have this past year in the wake of this pandemic. And she's looking for her next home, and she's going to hopefully make that with us at Suburban Hospital. And what better topic than defining and designing a healthy nurse? And I couldn't be more privileged or proud to have two amazing guests on my show today. And I want the audience, if they don't already know you, which I find that hard to believe, but if they don't, I want them to get to know you. So I'm going to start with Kym, just because her and I were having an interesting conversation right before we went on about the work that she's done in her past and the wellness consulting that she's doing right now. But Kym, tell me about what you did in Qatar with this Women and Children's Hospital.
Sure. Well, first, Theresa, thank you for having this platform and allowing nurses to come on and just share their stories. So hello, everyone. My name is Kym Ali, and I support nurse leaders with retention, and that is by building healthy, resilient, and inclusive teams. And like Theresa just mentioned, I had the privilege to go overseas about 7 years ago, I believe, and open a women and children's hospital. And very exciting opportunity because you don't find a lot of women and children's hospitals opening now in the States. And so I was a clinical activation consultant, and that role consisted of everything from developing policies and procedures to hiring, procurement of equipment and consumables, developing workflows for the units, even down to the EMR workflows, which is, the electronic medical record system. And once the new staff nurses would come on board, we would train them because we had nurses from all over the world, Philippines, India, South Africa, Europe. So when you're dealing with people with different skill sets, you need to bring everyone up to the same level. So that required some mentoring and nurturing, right? But it was so worth it because to see the nurses grow and to watch them move on to new roles, including leadership roles, it was all worth it.
Wow, fantastic. And then today, of course, being a wellness consultant and in the front lines of nursing in the middle of what we're in the middle of, and we'll talk a little bit about this because we were just talking about how we're not quite out of the woods yet here. There's still a lot going on. And then my second guest, Katie Boston-Leary, I just have to tell you, the work that you're doing with the American Nurses Association, the Healthy Nurse, Healthy Nation program, I've got so many questions for you, but I do have to share, I actually just read your piece of, in a beautiful book that I PDF'd out that I downloaded and shared with my chief nursing officer and then the CNO at Johns Hopkins Hospital about nurses and wildflowers, and talking about grace, humility, and resolve, where behind me at Suburban, we are all about grace, resiliency, and grit. So I think there's a lot of themes here, and I'm just thrilled to absolutely have you.
Thank you. Thanks. I really appreciate you having me, and I'm a fan of you as well. I've seen some of what you do. I'm also a fan of Kym's. She'll know we've connected a number of times on a number of projects. She invited me on her show. So thank you for having me, and I appreciate you reading that piece. That was it was created out of love, right, for nurses to let them know that we're here and we're together and we're here to support you. So it was pretty much an ode to the nurse at the bedside. So thank you for reading that.
Absolutely, and nurses at the bedside are the whole reason, and actually not just nurses at the bedside. Really, we need to address nursing at all levels and how to maintain your health and wellness right now. And, we could have had this conversation 2 years ago and the topics would have been the same, but not with the level of intensity, I think. But in this past 18 months, still going on, I feel like we are more than ever, just we need to pay attention, right? We need to pay attention to nurses and how do we support them. And I just smile whenever I read anybody's articles about this, because I feel like we're so lucky, like where I work and the chief nursing officer I have, shout out to Leanne Sedone, hashtag Suburban Strong.
I know her very well. Please tell her hello.
I absolutely will. As a matter of fact, when I shared that with her, she goes, "Oh, this is awesome." And of course, she'll share that with Deb Baker and everybody else. But the idea that nurses, you know, are like wildflowers, and that we're all different. We all come from different models. We all come from different backgrounds. Some of us went to an amazing Ivy League school. Some of us went to a community college. Some of us had to work 3 jobs to get through nursing school. Some of us were able to volunteer, but we're all there for the same purpose. And that's to care for our patients and their families and for each other.
Absolutely.
Right? So digging into those types of, you know, how do you build that? And I want Kym and Katie, I want you both to talk about, and you know, take your turns here, but we'll start with Katie. You know, when you're thinking about a foundation for not just, you know, I hate when people say, well, it's in order to retain people. It's not about in order to retain people. It's about doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to build, for those in the audience that are out there, you know, first of all, please like and comment either live or when you watch this later. We'd love to hear your information. And we'd love to hear what your thoughts are. And if you have any questions for us along the way, we'll get to those. But if you were starting from scratch, or even maybe if you just started building some sort of a support for nurses, if it's a home care group or a hospital setting or a subacute setting, you know, skilled nursing, assisted living, what are some of the core pieces, or what are some of the core things that leadership should be thinking about?
Yeah, that's a great question, because for nurses to be in the state of relative wellness, right? Because there will always be issues. It's the nature of the beast. We work in a very tough environment. However, it really is the onus of the organization and leaders to help set up an expectation that nurses should take care of themselves, right? And we should move away from the traditional setups and structures around, okay, well, we have EAP, so, you know, that's available if they need it. Or we have a care for the caregiver program, they can call whenever they need it. I think there needs to be more innovation in this space and more proactive measures around assessing and acting, right? So all the data indicators, even prior to COVID, but they've worsened since then from our data at Healthy Nurse, Healthy Nation, indicates that the health of nurses, and America's nurses, but I'm sure the same could apply across the globe, is worse than the average American, right? Nurses are more overweight, have higher levels of stress, get less than the recommended hours of sleep. We're seeing data also around nurse suicide rates being an issue, and that going up, and that was before the pandemic. There are also hazards with workplace violence and nurse abuse. Some lateral, of course, but it's still, there's some horizontal, and of course you have patients and families, and especially with mental illness being an issue, we're seeing more and more cases like that. And then musculoskeletal injuries as well. Musculoskeletal injuries are also an issue with nurses in terms of lifting heavy equipment and moving patients and things like that. So, and as a matter of fact, the last data that I saw from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it indicated that registered nurses have the 4th highest rate of injuries and illnesses that results in days away from work compared to other occupations. So what do you do with that? And I do think strategic plans in every organization should have a strategy with tactics around how to deal with it. It's priority number 1. And when you really think about it, if you work in an institution where you know that all efforts are being put in to care for you beyond the typical tasks and things that you do, it would help retention, right? So it's also a differentiator, actually, from a recruitment strategy, right? Because you can set yourselves apart. The equipment's not that different from one hospital to the other.
Right.
The way you're caring for your nurses can be. So that's where the opportunity lies for retention and recruitment as well.
Absolutely. And Kym, on your perspective, coming from your world, please add to that and add your sage advice that you would give to nursing leadership, nurse managers, or even to nurses themselves.
Right. Well, to echo Katie, first, data collection is key. Leaders should start to look at what is the current state of their staff nurses right now? How are they feeling emotionally, mentally, physically? Do they want to stay at this facility? You know, a lot of nurses are leaving to start businesses or to even seek other professions. So collecting data is key. And then once you have that information, build out a program that will help support your nurses' needs. Like Katie mentioned, if you talk to most HR executives, they will tell you that employees do not utilize the EAP. So being proactive and bringing the services to nurses will help. A lot of facilities are hiring new nurses, but you have to bear in mind that these nurses worked during the pandemic, so they're already burned out. They're probably traumatized from working on the front line. So how are you going to support this nurse who is now coming to your facility? If you look at the data, female nurses are 2 times as likely to commit suicide than any other profession. And that's a huge problem that we can't ignore. And so by nurse leaders bringing programs into the institution to let nurses know, hey, we care about your well-being, we want to provide resources for you, and we want you to feel valued, will make a huge difference in retention.
Oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely. I just keep smiling because I think about, like I said, I think about my nursing leadership here, and that is my frame of reference, right? I read literature, I read stories about what's happening elsewhere. I listen to podcasts about nurses saying, enough with the pizza parties, right? Keep us safe, give us the equipment we need to do our job, support us, give us the mental health time off, and actually literally come grab us off the floor, because a patient just died here and I have to go admit somebody here and I don't have time for a break, but that's where we need to you need to take a break. And then where do they go, right? Do we send them to the bathroom? And, oh, by the way, eat your dinner while you're in the bathroom because we don't have time for anything. Or do you have a resiliency center? I mean, I have yet to step foot in our resiliency center, and because I'm not at the bedside. And somebody was like, Theresa, you're having a bad day. You should go down to the resiliency center. And I was like, it's not for me. And they're like, it's for everybody. Mm-hmm. We're all stressed out. Mm-hmm. So of course I went and I checked, I went down there and I saw some people and I was like, okay, I wanted to take their picture because we have these massage chairs. And, we've got we don't have candles. Obviously, that would be a problem in our hospital, but we just have soft music.
You can get battery candles.
That's true. That's true. That's true. And we had soft music playing, and we had the amazing, massage chairs. And these folks were like, this is heaven. This is 5 minutes of heaven that is just helping me just decompress.
Right.
And the volunteers, I think, in the organization, it's a great volunteer opportunity for social workers, for anybody, actually, it's not to be a social worker, for anybody who wants to be there just to listen or to lend somebody, if it's still virtual or even if you've all been vaccinated and you want to get a hug from each other, we miss that human touch and contact. So it's really, it's so important. So,
yes, and the unfortunate part, if I may add, is that when you set up those spaces, you also have to protect it, because real estate is a premium, particularly in most settings, and most of the time you're looking for small room closets that no one would want, but all of a sudden you would find that it becomes the most popular space, and not just for nurses, but non-nurses too. And I remember setting that up as a CNO, we called it a sleep room, but it was really a recovery room. And but we would find every morning when we go in there are all these sheets and blankets in there, and we're like, who's sleeping in here? And it turns out the physicians started sleeping there because they felt it was better than their call room. So there's a protection that's required, unfortunately, when you set up these structures. And every culture is different, but you have to understand that there's a sustainment strategy as well to make sure people are taking advantage of it, and you're keeping data on how effective it is and how it really is resonating with your team that you have.
Absolutely. So, what are some of the differentiators, like when it comes to how employees treat nurses?
Yeah, I think there are a number of organizations outside of healthcare, and I've always, because I'm very curious, I just have a curious nature. I always connect with non-healthcare organizations to find out what they're doing, right? For example, even with the return to work strategies that a lot of organizations are putting into place, which doesn't necessarily affect a lot of nurses in acute care, but I read an article about what happened at Apple, right, with their strategy where they're postponing until October-ish because of the variant. So you have to pay attention to the Googles, the 3Ms, and a lot of those organizations find out what they're doing, because there are things that they are doing right. And what I learned very quickly is, even if nurses don't see examples of what we can do differently themselves in our setting, they're associated through relationships, marriage, and they know what's happening in other industries, right? Mm-hmm. And they envy what's happening in some of those other industries. So it's okay to take a page from what they're doing and be creative. Read about how they're managing their workers that have to work shifts and how they take care of them to show that they care for them. We all know about what Google does and how innovative they are. And I remember one of an EHR company that's in Wisconsin, when we went to visit them to look at a new product for software, they had a huge giant slide in the main area, right?
I know where that is in Madison.
That's right. But why is that? So these are organizations, and that is in healthcare, but innovation is required here. And it's the little things. It doesn't take a big slide in your lobby, right? One thing that we did working with our foundation is that we put together fit kits that will go under the nurses station. Yep. And in that fit kit, there were bands, a mat, some quick tips on quick exercises. There was one department where we got money to support a pedal, the little pedal apparatus you could put under your desk.
Yeah.
That became very popular, right? So it's the little things. It doesn't necessarily require a room where people have to go to with resiliency centers, which is good to have. But also think about how you can provide these support structures and systems and tools for them where they physically work, so they can use them.
Yeah.
So that's what I was saying.
Yeah. And Kym, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are from at the bedside on the unit, like Katie's talking about, suggestions for nurses on how to just care for themselves. We have, Katie, what you said in the beginning made me smile. And I've been a nurse for 29 years, but I always laugh because nurses are so good at caring for other people. We don't stop to care for ourselves.
Oh yeah.
I've heard that since I started. I've seen it. And we're always on to the next patient. And, it's easy when there's, we've started a healthy food thing on some of our units where instead of the junk food container that you see, kind of shouldn't be at the nurse's station, but you know what I mean, at the break room, instead of grabbing something that isn't healthy for you, that there's just like little healthy snacks. And it's like something a little bit better, but we started putting notes on there. That say, these carrots, because we want to keep a better eye on you, right? Or something like that, just so we can help them understand that we're doing it. It's not that we don't want to give you chocolate. Okay? Yeah. It's that we're looking out for your health. We're trying to help you along on that journey. So.
Great. Well, I mean, those are great, healthy initiatives to encourage nurses to take care of themselves. Other measures that nurses can do is take your breaks. We have the habit of working 12 hours straight. I mean, we won't even go to the bathroom sometimes. I've done it myself. Take your breaks, because that will give you time to relax. You can go to the resilience room, and gather your thoughts together. Go eat. It's important to at least get water or healthy snacks to refuel, because 12 hours is a long shift. Also starting programs on your unit. Like something that I initiated was a listening ear program. And what that is, it's like a little jar that you keep in the nurse's station, and you can put a picture of an ear inside the jar. And if you're having a rough time, if your patient crashed or something isn't going well, take the ear and give it to a colleague, and that lets them know that you need a timeout and that you need to talk to someone. So just programs like that, it doesn't cost anything and it can make a world of a difference.
Yeah. I feel like empowering nurses to do that. That's the hard part. That's the challenge, right? Yeah. I even remember last summer, gosh, I hope we don't go back there again, but last summer when we had 80 plus patients in our very small 232 bed hospital, and we had 80 plus patients, and my director of critical care is trying to stand up 2 additional units, right? And then of course I'm like, but I need to schedule this interview. And she's like, oh, okay. It was like, okay, nurse leader, you need to take a break too, right? You need to take a break, and you can't be at home and sitting on your laptop working. That's not a break, right? So it's like, okay, let's give away a pedicure at a massage or, at a beauty salon, or let's have a spa day. And we actually just gave me a great idea. I feel like we should do a spa day giveaway to somebody. So maybe during new employee orientation, that could be kind of fun. We'll give that away as a gift.
It's all about making self-care, saying that self-care is not selfish, and making self-care sexy.
Oh, I like that.
It is what it's required. And there's an ethical obligation. And we have that in one of our provision 5 of our ethics statements, that it's a requirement for us to take care of ourselves, right? And I think the more nurses hear that, the more they'll know it's okay. The more they'll realize that it's okay to take a break. And when you take a break, you don't have to keep your phone on you, hand it off to someone else, and really disconnect. And the same goes for leaders, because leaders are also in this space where they are stretched and stressed, and they're trying to support their teams, but there's not enough to support them. And after the pandemic, we have started to see a lot of attrition in leadership, nursing leadership, which brings on a whole other set of issues, right? Because a lot of your seasoned leaders are not in place, and that sets up this cycle of, okay, let's get the next guy who's most engaged up and put them in place, and let's crown them without giving them the tools to be successful. Right. Which then hurts the team. So it just is this cycle that we continue to find ourselves in, that we need to stop repeating.
Yeah, we've lost, I think in the last year, I watched several, not necessarily nursing leaders, but maybe a few educators. I've seen some folks in other key leadership positions. I think the one thing Suburban Hospital has going for it is highly tenured leaders, which is fantastic. But I think where people were like, well, I'll just keep working until I'm 70. And all of a sudden it was like pandemic. And they're like, I'm going to rethink that, right? Yeah. It's time to reprioritize my life. So it's like, how do we keep people at the bedside, keep them engaged, and take care of them all the way through? Yeah. It's a daunting task, but I feel like I've got the right people on this show to talk through some tactics to help people, both as individuals and as leaders. Now, what would you say to the president of a hospital? What would you say to that senior leader, or maybe it's the finance person we should be talking to? What would you say to that finance person, like, when they're saying we don't have any money, or we're in a budget crunch, or we're really hurting right now because we haven't had our surgical volumes that we've had, that we used to count on for the past year? What would be the advice there?
Yeah, Kym, do you want to go first? It's fine.
Yeah, well, I actually did a couple of shows on this, and number one, it looks like there is money because of these sign-on bonuses, and also travel nurses are not cheap. They cost a lot of money. And 2, you can't afford not to invest in your staff. So if you go back and look at some of my shows, I linked how nurse well-being has an impact on quality of care, patient satisfaction, medication errors. So when you have nurses coming to work that are exhausted, that can't think or focus, mistakes happen. Your HCAP scores will go down, and that will have a higher impact on lost revenue.
Yep. Just tying the dots together.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've always wondered, and I love my finance people, but I've always wondered, how can we afford to pay out of this pocket, but then we don't have any money in this pocket? But I'm not at that level where people explain that breakdown to me. So it's always fascinating. But even some of the simple things that you can do that don't even require money, things like the ear jar, lend an ear, I need to talk to somebody, or just making somebody take their break like they should. I mean, these are some pretty easy and simple tactics. I think having leadership present on all shifts is important as well, and leader rounding. And I know I've talked about, I could go on. I have a, it's my girl crush on my chief nursing officer. She's just awesome. And when we hire people that work nights, one of the things they always ask is like, well, what does the presence look like, right? Is the director, the manager, the director, the educator, the chief nursing officer, are they here only during the day? Because I work nights and I'm the one who always gets the leftover slice of cold pizza. I'm the one who gets, when somebody brings in treats of some sort, there's nothing there. Or, if it's self-scheduling, the self-scheduling comes out during the day. So by the time I get there, it's all wonky for me. So it's like we've made a really concerted effort here at Suburban to really make sure that the nurses see the leaders. And even our hospital-based councils, we specifically have a night shift hospital-based council. And Leanne is there, and Karen Nevis is there, our director of professional practice. They are there once a month, and Leanne's there all the time. That's a person who I know she just took a few days off and went to the beach, but it's like she needs more time to just take care of herself as well. But it's like having that presence all hours of the day, right? So many of us, it's not like we're not Monday through Friday in a hospital. We have to be present and aware all the time. I would like to, I'm going to pivot this conversation a little bit, thinking about nursing safety and the wellness of the nurse as it relates to taking care of patients and or family members that maybe either the patient or the family member might be struggling with some mental health issues. And then that workplace violence that comes as a result of that. I would love to hear, because we keep security officers, like real police officers that we hire, contract in our emergency department, in our specialty care unit. Like we keep them right there because we want to make sure our staff are safe. But those patients sometimes, not just at our hospital, but they board. They could be there for 2 or 3 days. And I'd love to hear what your all's thoughts are on, like, what are some things that you could come up with, either data points or suggestions or thoughts on how we can protect our nurses?
Yeah, 1 in 4 nurses deal with nurse abuse on the job, and a higher percentage do not report it. It also comes, and nurse abuse and workplace violence comes in numerous forms. It's not all physical. It also can come from a patient that has all their faculties, but they have to lash out at some point. I also had to, which is very unfortunate, but as you know, nursing is a female sex-dominated profession, and nurses are sexually harassed a lot. And I remember dealing with a patient who, used the term frequent flyer, and he was always disruptive when he came in. Great personality, and everybody knew him. But one thing that was hidden for so long, as many times that he'd been in the hospital, is that he was very sexually charged when he was in the room. When nurses would go in, he'll always make comments to the point of he'll actually act like he's trying to touch them so they can run out of his room. And it's unfortunate to say this, but I had to go on the unit and tell them this is not okay.
Right.
You don't check your rights at the door because you clock in. And we actually had to manage directly with him that if you engage in this behavior moving forward, you're not allowed to come to this hospital. You can go somewhere else for your care, which is a very strong statement to make to a patient. But you have to, right? Because of all the things that we've been talking about. Now, of course, after I did that, heard from his wife, who said, who I'd never met before, who said that we were making this up. Her husband loves her and all that. So that's a whole other dynamic.
Oh my goodness.
But we knew what we knew. And the point still was, you're not going to do this when you come in here. The minute we find out, we are going to escort you out or get you to another hospital as soon as we stabilize you so you can seek care somewhere else. And that changed things. And that's all it took. And it changed things. So it comes in many forms, and it also happens between nurses, right? And we need to do better, to be honest. Now, there's a lot in terms of, because this is what I did my dissertation on, with some of the oppression that occurs with this group, with these professionals, right? You know, where it's female dominated. You have the hierarchical structures, right, with physicians and nurses. You have policies that apply to this group but not to others. So there's these inequities. So when you do have that, which is that's the dynamic you find in oppressed groups, they turn on each other. And that's part of what you see with the Eat Your Young nurse bullying that's occurring, because when the pressure is coming from all sides and from top down, they turn. Where's that tension is going to have to go somewhere. Right. So nurses turn on each other. So the awareness is important. Setting up systems and structures for reporting is important, and also making those stories, telling those stories as well, so people can see examples of those and what was done about it. And really having a no tolerance policy is key, not just between nurses, but also with patients, with physicians, and the like. And we have to think about some of the things that we do unintentionally that sets this up, you know, that it's okay to bear down on a certain group. And I'm guilty as an administrator in my past. It was always, not always, but in some cases, if you don't do your competencies, you're going to be suspended and you're going to be possibly terminated if you don't do it by X date. And some of that is regulatory requirements, but you don't see that happening with a physician group, right? So that's why, and they see that. So those are all the things that we need to pay attention to set the culture right, that what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Having a strong medical leadership support when certain things go awry in that group, to know that, okay, if it's not okay over here, it shouldn't be okay over there. And that will help reset the culture to what it should be, where there's equity all around. There's openness and transparency, and there's accountability.
I was going to say accountability is the key. Yeah, absolutely. Working in human resources, we are faced with that all of the time. And we do hear employees come in and say, well, what about this division or this department? It doesn't even have to be a physician. It could be a particular unit or department where it seems like, well, they get away with it. And yet, why am I my feet are to the fire to take care of this? But, you know, when you were talking about, and I bet we've all experienced this as nurses, I've had patients where they've either kicked, grabbed, bit, and I can remember, well, they just didn't mean it. They, you know, they're confused. They're, you know, and there's a point, like, I mean, I could see where nurses would, and I haven't been at the bedside in a while, but I could see where nurses would dismiss it. Like, it's not their fault, right? They can't help it. But family members, yes, you know, and if you don't have any, you know, if they don't have any mental health issues and instead they have somebody to lash out at, that's not appropriate.
It's not. And what a game changer would be is it's part of the admission packet. There's a statement that all patients and families should acknowledge and sign.
We have one.
Right?
We have a
and list of things that's not okay.
Yep.
Make sure nurses see that list and adjust it every time, because people are creative. So it's a document that will have to be refreshed and reviewed constantly, right? Because it comes in a number of different forms.
Yeah, I think I like what you just said, making sure that the nurse remembers that's part of that admission document. It's not just something that you check off in your EMR to say, okay, I gave them this. Let's review this, because we talk about it. I facilitate new employee orientation, and we talk about your safety as a staff member, you know, and it's not just nursing. I've had environmental services folks that have gone into a room and have been harassed, and
Absolutely.
and we've had situations where people didn't want somebody from a different race or culture taking care of them. So we've also addressed that, and that's where that leadership that defends you and sticks up for you, because staff have rights just like patients and family members have rights as well. And I know Rollis is chomping at the bit to ask a question about self-care.
Well, I love all the points you guys are making, and the last point you made, it reminds me of an SLA, a service level agreement, on a lot of contracts that basically you're setting up with your patients. So these things, these are our responsibilities, these are your responsibilities. This is okay. This is not okay. I love that. That's really cool. I've interviewed a lot of folks about self-care, and including Kym and some of the others, and I hear that quite a bit. And I also hear that nurses are caretakers. I hear that. But then we know that employers also have a responsibility as well. And I've talked with nurses who said, okay, I only have a chance, you guys talked about this, I only have a chance to use the restroom or eat lunch or whatever during a shift. If you were to put a percentage on it, what percentage is the nurse's responsibility, and what percentage would you say is the employer's responsibility when it comes to self-care and taking care of themselves? I would love to hear it from you as nurses, each of you, whatever your take is on this. What is that percent? What should that percentage look like, and should it be more of a partnership, or is it more on one side than the other?
Well, from a nurse's perspective, I would say 100% onus is on you, because no one else is going to advocate for you except yourself. From a leadership perspective, you know, that's your team. You need your team there, right? So I would say probably leadership, I'm going to say 90%, just only because you need to take that 10% for yourself as well. But I love your idea of partnerships, you know, looking out for each other, making sure that the nurses have to make sure that the nurse leaders get their break and take care of themselves, just like the nurse leaders are looking out for the nurses.
Katie, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and I appreciate Kym's response, because I do think we're in a place where nurses can vote with their feet. And if you're in an environment that's not healthy, that's not working for you, you have a choice to make, and make it. Because when you don't, some things will suffer, and ultimately you will, even if you don't realize it. At the same time, I think there's an element also, because I read a saying where someone had on social media, one of my feeds, and it said, get yourself a job where self-care is not special. Like, it's not a special event. It has to be embedded in structures. And one of the conferences that I listened in on for AONL, and Kym, I think you went to AONL too. I think you mentioned that.
I did, yeah.
You attended it virtually. They're actually embedding it into nurse leader training program. There's one organization that had it as part of their curriculum for nurse leaders. And it should be part of the orientation onboarding program, so people know that it's okay. And it's really, of course, on you. It starts with you, but organizations need to be all in about strategizing constantly on how to manage this, because it's a real concern. And to the question earlier about organizations that say they don't have the money, it's costing you anyway.
Right.
You're paying anyway, and you're paying probably 3 and 4 or 5 times over what you would pay for those little investments that you can make. And I think as nurse leaders, because I just did a presentation on making the business case for nurse wellness programs, there are certain data points you need to pay attention to, right? And there's one of the concepts that we discussed was, you know, you have absenteeism, which is, you know, I need a me day. I'm not coming to work. I may not be sick, but I just need like a me day, and I need to take it. But then there's presenteeism, where you're actually at work, and it's not that you're lingering and not functioning because you don't want to. You're not functioning because you can't, right, but you're physically there. But from the numbers perspective, from a staffing office perspective, the box is checked, that body is there. But what type of care is that person providing to patients that rely on that nurse, right? Or any healthcare provider. So I do think that the onus is on you to make decisions on what's best for you. And some of the adage about work-life balance, it's ideal, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. And you can look at it a number of ways. I'm going to strive towards that, or I'm going to pick my spot. Even if I don't have balance, I'm going to find my spots where I can have my mini breaks. When I come home from work, I have a process where I decompress. I'll sing my favorite song in the car at the loudest volume, or before I face these kids, I'm going to sit in my car and just listen to a podcast. We have to find our spots to take care of ourselves and make it okay to do that. And not just when you leave work, but also find them while you're at work, while you're striving towards getting to that balance.
You know, I have to share with you, it made me think, I can remember, and this was not a good culture. I didn't stay there very long, but I can remember working in an ICU, my sandwich back in the day, all wrapped up, my little sandwich I brought from home, taking a break. So I took my break, my one break in the 12-hour shift. That's not right, first of all. It was 5 minutes to the bathroom. I ate my sandwich in the bathroom. The educator had enough presence of mind. This was before electronic anything. And they had hung the monthly in-service that we were required to read with a little pen attached. I'm in the bathroom reading my in-service, eating my lunch, and I got it all done in about 6 minutes. And then it was back on the unit. And wow, that was it.
That is not okay. Wait, see, those are the subtle things that we do.
Oh my gosh. I just remember she had presence of mind to like hang it on the bathroom door because she knew that's the only place we were going to see it when we took our,
I remember those types of strategies that I'll hear, like put it in a bathroom or the break room and people will read it. Have to move away from those.
And let alone the infection prevention issues with eating while going to the bathroom. I mean.
But do you see how we've normalized that? Like I've experienced that as well. And that's a problem. Like we need to break out of that habit.
Yes. Yeah. It's funny. I think about, and I don't work 12-hour shifts, but I'm still stressed. I'm supposed to be hiring all of these nurses that we've lost and trying to find people and the right people. And we can't, from a recruitment perspective, I always tell people I have the best product, right? Because my product is my hospital and the leadership, and I believe in it, and it's amazing, but it's still very stressful. So Rollis already knows that, wine just can't be the only thing I rely on for my wellness. But for me, it's like, I love to go home and cook a meal. It relaxes me to chop up the vegetables and saute up my meal. And yes, there is wine while I'm cooking, but it's all good. It's like finding whatever it is, right?
We have a comment, by the way. Joanne says, a nurse's job is indeed mentally, physically, and emotionally demanding. Tough situations are there all day, every day. And I truly admire how our angels in the sick room manage that. So that's for you guys. But Theresa,
go ahead,
you mentioned wine. So we have to at least touch the subject. What is? I have two questions on that. So what is your favorite type of wine, along with maybe your favorite music to unwind to after a tough day? Each of you guys want to take that?
Right,
those are the comments.
I'll start. That's easy because that's at the tip,
Okay, go ahead. The comments too. I want them to say it too.
I'm half Italian, and so I love my Italian food. So many trips to Italy, and I love a good either Chianti, so the Sangiovese grape, and it could be either Chianti Classico Reserva or it could be like a Brunello that you get from Montalcino. And it's kind of funny. I listen to my Alexa, my Amazon Music, and it's either going to be like a Frank Sinatra station. So then you get everybody like Louis Prima, Dean Martin, Tony Bennett. Or some days my husband knows if I walk through the door and I'm like, please put Jack Johnson's station on like right now, then I need that kind of chill vibe of Jack Johnson to just like, because I've had a bad day, and he knows he'll pour the wine, flip the music, and we're off to the races. So what about you guys? What about you, Kym?
Oh gosh. Well, how I unwind is going to the gym. So I take care of my physical well-being, and then I love listening to mindset podcasts because I need to take care of my mental and emotional health as well. In terms of wine, I'm a sweet girl, so I love Moscato.
There you go.
Ooh, I like Moscatos too.
Yeah.
Katie, it's your turn.
Yeah,
What's up?
yeah, I know. I'm thinking. So I'm transitioning. Teresa, I'll ultimately get to your level. And as a matter of fact, I was planning a trip to Italy in November. Then I heard it's going to be too cool, so I'm going to scrap that till next year because I want to get there when it's warm. But as far as unwinding, I like listening. I like finding songs that from the 80s and 90s and early 2000s that were like, you know, good R&B songs that you totally forgot about, and you know, all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, and it takes you back to times when life was so much simpler because you know we all associate songs with certain times in our lives. So I love that because it helps me reflect and it takes me away. It Calgons me. Remember Calgon Take Me Away? Kind of does that for me when I hear some songs that, and I know I'm digging myself by saying that. Oh my gosh! But I like hearing throwback songs. I really, really do.
Nice.
In terms of, and then I've really lately, and you know, along the lines of with Kym, and I know Kym's, I think you're a yogi, right, Kym? You're a yogi?
Yes. Hot yoga.
Yeah. So I never thought yoga was for me, and I'm saying that because I know there are a lot of people out there that feel that way. I thought it was not for me. My attention's too scattered, not my thing. And I also didn't see it as a Black thing. Right? I would do it with some girlfriends for fun on a Saturday, but me do it regularly, that's just not me. And then someone turned me on to an app, it's called Fit On, and it's free. And it has a lot of celebrities on there that show you their workouts, and they'll do them. Actually, you can do it with them. It feels personalized, actually.
Wow.
And they have some yoga sessions on there that you can play. And now I'm totally turned on to it, right? So
Nice.
I've done that a couple of times upstairs after dinner with my candle by my window in my bedroom. And I have a basket near my bed, and my husband thinks it's weird, but I have a basket in my bed with like a lot of exercise stuff. and so I have no excuse, right? So I can roll out of bed and exercise anytime.
There you go.
I have my bands in there. So I have a beach towel in there, and I'll spread it out, and I'll do a yoga session for like 5 or 10 minutes, and it's huge. It just does so much for my psyche late in the evening after dinner. And I'm not just doing the typical wash the dishes, watch TV, and go to bed, right? It's an interrupter. As far as wines go, I was a Moscato person. I still drink it, but because of the calories that sweet wine has, I'm transitioning to reds. I'm transitioning to reds, and I do sweet reds for now. If I have no choice, I'll do a Cabernet. But I'm transitioning to reds because I hear when you grow up, and I'm trying to grow up in the wine as a wine drinker. I'm slowly transitioning to red.
So there's a podcast that I listen to when I go for my walks because I do all of my working out in the morning. But you know, I'm not like you guys, unfortunately. When I do my podcast, I'm listening to Wine for Normal People podcast. So that's my future life. My future life is going to be working in a winery. I've got it all figured out.
Owning one? Or owning one, right?
Probably not owning one. I'd like to work in one. As a recruiter and sales, I have to believe in my product, right? So at Suburban, I believe in my hospital. I believe in my chief nursing officer, my nursing leaders, my units. But I also believe in wine. So I could sell that.
Wine makes the world go around.
Do you give a bottle to every new nurse, Theresa?
You know, I actually gave one once to a director, and it was one of I call them the $2 Chuck, right? The Trader Joe's wine that was like $2.99. and I covered the label and it said, "Drink me in case of emergency." So she always kept it on her desk.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so I've got Theresa, this is Chianti, I have Kym Moscato, and Katie. What did you say yours was again?
Sweet red.
Sweet red?
Yeah, sweet red. That's where I mostly am.
Like a cab or something like that, or a Cabernet or something?
When I don't have a choice, because you don't find sweet reds in a lot of restaurants. So
Get you a port. We can get you a nice port wine.
Oh yeah, ports are sweet. Yeah.
Okay, so that's up what I have it in there. So it's in the record books. These are your favorites.
I just have to thank you all. I mean, I am going to go back and watch this again, because sometimes I think when you're participating, you don't get all of the amazing nuggets of information. And I'm going to make sure I share this with all of our nursing leaders, because what you talk about is so important. And, you know, nurses need to own it themselves, but I feel like leaders can give them permission and make it okay to have that care while they're working on the unit, and then really focusing on what can they do at home as well, right? How can they provide that care? So it doesn't have to be in a bottle of wine.
Exactly. I think there's quite a few who I think are impressed with what you guys did today, because I'm noticing some applause here across the different areas.
There we go.
Awesome.
Well, thank you guys so very much. And then, you know, I will have my next RN Connect show in probably 2 weeks. Guests to be determined if you're interested in being on one of my shows. We always have great conversation, great topics, and we always have a lot of fun. So thank you guys. Thanks, everybody.
So don't jump off too quick. We want to make sure we end it just right. 1 second here.
Absolutely. It's all good.
Joanne, if you could just let me know before I hit that button. I think we're at that time, we're probably safe.
Are we safe?
I think so. Let me just. Joanne, can you hear me?
Yes, Rollis.
Are we good to go?